The alarm on Sarah's glucose monitor went off at 6:30 in the morning, and I was out of bed like a shot because when you're the parent of a kid with type 1 diabetes, you learn to distinguish those alarms in your sleep. I found Sarah already awake, pale and shaky, fumbling for her glucose tablets, mumbling, "Dad, I'm at 65 and dropping." 17 years old and more responsible than most adults I know, but diabetes doesn't give you a day off, doesn't care if you're tired or have a test, or just want a morning to yourself. I helped her sit up, told her, "Take 3 tablets, let's recheck in 15, and just like every other morning since she was diagnosed at 8, we did our little battle routine, life, death, and breakfast, all rolled into one. By 7, her numbers were steady enough that she could get ready for school, so she grabbed her phone and test kit and went out to the porch to wait for her friend Emma, wanting to keep an eye on her levels. That's when the day flipped on its head because Margaret Whitfield, our HOA chairwoman, world's worst neighbor and self-appointed sheriff of suburban America, stormed across her lawn hollering, "Get away from my fence!" The way she looked at Sarah, you'd think she caught her spray painting obscenities, not checking her glucose monitor. Now, Margaret's made a hobby out of harassing folks over mailbox colors and lawn heights. But she'd fixated on Sarah these last months, convinced our daughter was some kind of delinquent. I stepped outside and tried to keep things calm because I could see Sarah's blood sugar still wasn't right and stress just made things worse. "Ma'am, my daughter's on our property waiting for her ride." Margaret just squared her shoulders and said, "She's always out here acting suspicious. I've seen the needles, the equipment that's drug paraphernalia, and you're covering for her." That's when it hit me hard just how far gone Margaret really was. I said, "That's insulin. She's diabetic. She needs those supplies to stay alive." Margaret snorted and started on one of her tirades. "That's just a convenient excuse. Real diabetics are old and fat. She's young and thin, obviously lying." Sarah tried to keep her composure, but her hands were shaking, her face going even paler. "Mrs. Whitfield, I've had diabetes since I was 8. I'm not doing anything wrong." But Margaret just got closer, louder. "I know drug equipment when I see it. And I know when a judge is helping his kid cover up something criminal." See, what Margaret didn't know is that every time she called the school, the state, or child services to report us for neglect or illegal activity, she was making herself look crazier. Each claim got dismissed. The school nurse, the CPS agent, even the local police, they all saw Sarah's pump and her medical charts and realized immediately Margaret was just stirring up trouble. But the stress was starting to get to Sarah. She started hiding when she checked her blood sugar, feeling ashamed of the one thing she needed to survive. That morning, Margaret went further than ever before. When Sarah's monitor started beeping again, she reached for her insulin pen and Margaret lost it. "She's injecting herself with drugs right in front of us," she shrieked, jabbing her finger through the air like she was making a citizen's arrest. "She's so addicted she can't even wait." I just about lost it trying to explain, "That's insulin. Without it, she could go into shock, into a coma, she could die." Margaret rolled her eyes and pulled out her phone with this look of triumph like she'd finally caught us. "I'm calling the police. This ends now. A judge protecting his drug addict daughter, not in my neighborhood." Sarah started crying, not from fear, but sheer frustration. "Why does she hate me, Dad? I've never done anything to her." And what do you say to that except, "Some people just need to hurt others to feel powerful. It's not about you, sweetheart. It's her." But Margaret, overhearing, just doubled down. "I'm the only one protecting this neighborhood from drug dealers hiding behind fake medical excuses." When the cops showed up, Officer Davis and Officer Chin, both regulars in the area thanks to Margaret's frequent emergencies, Margaret launched into her performance. She's injecting drugs, her father's covering for her, she's under the influence right now. Davis looked at Sarah, who by then had steadied herself, and asked, "Miss, are you all right?" "Yes, sir," Sarah said, showing him her glucose tablets and explaining the blood sugar crash. "She has type 1 diabetes. I explained she needs insulin and monitoring devices." Officer Chin examined her pump, nodded, asked for documentation, which I provided medical ID prescriptions. All of it. "These can be faked." Margaret snatched Sarah's medical ID, clutching it like it was the smoking gun. "Real diabetics don't look like this. You all are in on it." By this point, Margaret was so far down her rabbit hole, she accused the officers of being bribed by me. Rich people get special treatment. That's what's really going on. Officer Chin just looked at her and said, "Ma'am, calling 911 with false reports is a crime. There's no drug activity here, and this young lady is managing a real medical condition." That's when Margaret snapped. She lunged at Sarah, tried to rip the insulin pump off her body, yelling, "I'm confiscating this drug equipment as evidence I got between them," but not before she tore the tubing loose, leaving Sarah in pain and without her lifeline. Officer Davis grabbed Margaret, cuffed her while she shrieked, "You're all faking it, Sarah." Her blood sugar climbing fast, needed emergency insulin. EMTs arrived in minutes, but the damage was done. Sarah spent the night in the hospital, her levels dangerously high, and I sat beside her, thinking, this isn't just harassment. This could have killed her. The DA called the next morning. Once they realized who I was, federal judge or not, they promised Margaret would face every charge: assault, harassment, false police reports, endangering a child. At the preliminary hearing, Margaret took the stand for herself, which, let me tell you, was a gift. "That girl is faking it, and her dad's covering for her," she said. The prosecutor asked, "Are you aware that type 1 diabetes is a real medical condition?" Margaret just scoffed. "I've done my research. It's just a way for attention seekers to get special treatment." The courtroom gasped. Even her lawyer cringed. The prosecutor pressed on. "What are your medical qualifications?" Margaret Chin-Up said. "I'm an HOA chairwoman trained to spot suspicious behavior. You think HOA training qualifies you to diagnose medical conditions?" "Common sense," does, she shot back. "Real diabetics are old and overweight. She's young, she's thin, obviously lying. It would have been funny if it weren't so tragic, watching her unravel, insisting she knew better than every doctor, every test, every fact." Then came the security footage played for the jury. Margaret grabbing Sarah's pump, Sarah crying out in pain. "What did you think you were doing, confiscating drug paraphernalia?" Margaret replied without a hint of shame. If she was really diabetic, taking her pump wouldn't have hurt her. That silence in the courtroom. It's the sound of every decent person realizing there are people so blinded by their own hate, they'll risk a child's life just to win an argument. Sarah got to read her victim impact statement at sentencing, standing up there, still wearing her backup pump, voice steady. "What hurt the most," she said, "was not just the danger, but being told my illness was a lie. That I'm a liar, a drug addict not even worthy of being believed." Even the judge looked moved. And when Margaret got sentenced to 2 years in prison, 5 years probation, and hundreds of hours of community service at a diabetes organization, no one in that room felt sorry for her. Here's the kicker. 6 months later, the diabetes organization's director wrote to us. Margaret refused to learn a single thing, kept calling the kids attention seekers, never repented. She violated probation soon after, got herself sent right back. You'd think that's the end of it. But the truth is, Margaret's ignorance, her hate accidentally did more good than she could ever understand. Sarah became an advocate, spoke at schools and conferences, helped get new HOA rules passed, protecting people with medical conditions, even inspired our hospital to launch an education program. Folks in our neighborhood started to ask questions, real questions, curious, compassionate, instead of assuming the worst. Margaret tried to break my daughter. She ended up making her stronger, braver, and louder than ever before. Sometimes justice isn't just about punishment, it's about what grows in the cracks left behind by cruelty. Sarah still checks her blood sugar on our porch, but now when people see her equipment, they don't whisper or judge. They ask, "How does that work?" They care. That's the world Margaret accidentally built for us, one where understanding trumps suspicion, where a kid like Sarah can stand up and say, "I'm diabetic and I'm not ashamed." So yeah, Margaret tried to silence my kid. Instead, she gave her a mission. That's real justice. If you've ever witnessed or experienced something like this, or you've got thoughts on how communities should handle ignorance and disability, I want to hear from you. Where's the line between concern and harassment? What would you have done in my shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about what real justice looks like.